they found something in Egypt's western desert that shouldn't exist. Beneath the sand, 400 kilometers southwest of Cairo, lies a stone circle older than Stonehenge, more complex than any Neolithic monument in Europe. 14 archaeologists from 3 different universities have examined it, and none can explain how nomadic desert peoples created astronomical alignments precise enough to track the summer solstice 7,000 years ago. What you're about to see challenges everything we thought we knew about the birth of civilization. And the most disturbing part? Most Egyptologists pretend it doesn't exist. After 3 decades documenting Egypt's archaeological mysteries and interviewing researchers from Cambridge to Cairo University, I've learned that the most profound discoveries often hide in plain sight. These aren't the monuments that grace tourist brochures or museum exhibitions. These are the sites that make Western academics uncomfortable, the places that don't fit neat timelines or established theories about how civilization developed. Egypt stretches far beyond the Nile Valley that most people associate with pharaohs and pyramids. The country encompasses over 1 million square kilometers of desert, mountain, and oasis, each environment preserving different aspects of human prehistory. In the eastern desert, hunters left rock art galleries that predate any known written language. Along the Nubian border, temple complexes rival Karnak in scope, but remain barely studied. In the Sahara's heart, megalithic sites suggest sophisticated societies flourished when the desert was green savanna. The Western archaeological establishment has focused intensively on dynastic Egypt, the period from 3100 BC onward, when pharaohs ruled a unified kingdom. This makes perfect sense for understanding political history and religious development, but it has created enormous blind spots regarding the preceding millennia when equally sophisticated but different civilizations called Egypt home. Predynastic cultures, Nubian kingdoms, desert nomads, and eastern mountain peoples left archaeological signatures that resist conventional interpretations. Today, we'll explore 4 sites that demonstrate this oversight. Each location presents evidence that contradicts standard models of technological and social development in Northeast Africa. Each has been documented by professional archaeologists, but remains marginalized in broader discussions about Egypt's past. Each forces us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about how complex societies emerge. These mysteries matter because they reveal Egypt as a cultural crossroads where African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean influences merged over millennia. They show technological innovations appearing centuries or millennia before they were supposed to exist. They demonstrate sophisticated astronomical knowledge among peoples dismissed as primitive. Most importantly, they prove that Egypt's story extends far beyond pharaohs and pyramids into a deeper, stranger past. What makes these oversights particularly troubling is that Egyptian archaeologists have been highlighting these discoveries for decades. Dr. Fekri Hassan from University College London, Dr. Salima Ikram from the American University in Cairo, and many others have published detailed studies of sites we'll examine today. But their work rarely penetrates popular understanding or even undergraduate textbooks about Egyptian archaeology. Let's begin where civilization itself might have begun, in a place most people have never heard of, where ancient peoples created something that still confounds modern science. The satellite image looked wrong. Dr. Fred Windorf from Southern Methodist University stared at the aerial photographs his team had taken of Egypt's western desert in 1973, trying to understand what he was seeing. Scattered across a dried lakebed called Nabta Playa were dark spots arranged in patterns too regular to be natural, too ancient to make sense. Nabta Playa sits 100 kilometers west of Abu Simbel, deep in the Sahara where annual rainfall hasn't exceeded 5 millimeters in recorded history. Today, it's an empty depression surrounded by sandstone outcrops and acacia trees clinging to life around scattered water sources. But the satellite imagery suggested something remarkable. This desolate place had once supported substantial human settlements. Windorf's team reached the site in December 1973 after a grueling drive across trackless desert. What they found changed our understanding of Neolithic Africa forever. Arranged around the ancient lakeshore were thousands of hearths, house foundations, and storage pits, indicating permanent settlement by pastoralists who herded cattle when this region was green savanna. Carbon dating eventually placed these settlements between 9,000 and 5,000 BC, making them contemporary with early farming communities in the Fertile Crescent. But the real shock came when they began mapping megalithic structures scattered across the playa. At the site's center stood a stone circle 3.6 meters in diameter, composed of slabs weighing up to 2 tons each. The slabs had been shaped and positioned with mathematical precision, their arrangement clearly deliberate rather than random. Initial surveys suggested the circle aligned with cardinal directions, but nobody understood why cattle herders would invest such enormous labor in astronomical monuments. Dr. J. McKim Malville from the University of Colorado joined the team in 1998 to conduct detailed archaeoastronomy studies. What he discovered defied every assumption about technological development in prehistoric Africa. The Nabta Playa calendar circle represents one of the world's oldest astronomical observatories, predating Stonehenge by at least 1,500 years and the earliest European megalithic sites by millennia. But its sophistication suggests knowledge that shouldn't have existed among nomadic pastoralists living in tents and following seasonal rains. The stone circle's main alignment targets the summer solstice with precision exceeding 1 degree. On June 21st each year, sunrise occurs exactly between 2 megalithic gates positioned at the circle's eastern edge. This alignment has remained constant for nearly 7,000 years, despite precession gradually shifting star positions, indicating the builders understood and compensated for astronomical cycles spanning centuries. Even more remarkable are alignments targeting specific stars visible in prehistoric times, but no longer observable from this latitude. 3 stone pairs within the circle point toward ancient positions of Sirius, Dubhe, and other stars crucial for navigation and seasonal prediction. The precision required for these alignments demands sophisticated mathematical knowledge and systematic observations conducted over multiple generations. The circle's construction presents equally puzzling engineering challenges. Each megalith weighs between 1,000 and 2,000 kilograms and required transport from quarries 3 kilometers away. Moving stones this massive across loose sand without wheels, draft animals, or wooden rollers would challenge modern equipment. Yet the builders positioned each slab within centimeters of optimal alignment, suggesting surveying techniques that supposedly didn't develop until dynastic times. Beneath the circle, excavations revealed a complex foundation system designed to maintain structural stability on shifting sands. The builders carved bedrock platforms, filled gaps with carefully graded stone chips, and created drainage channels preventing water damage during occasional desert floods. This foundation engineering demonstrates understanding of soil mechanics and structural forces typically associated with much later civilizations. Perhaps most puzzling is evidence for systematic site modification spanning millennia. Radiocarbon dating shows the original circle was built around 5000 BC, then extensively modified around 4500 BC to improve stellar alignments. Later modifications occurred around 4000 BC, and again around 3600 BC, suggesting continuous astronomical observations and architectural refinements across 40 generations. The Combined Prehistoric Expedition, a joint venture between Southern Methodist University, Polish Academy of Sciences, and Egyptian Geological Survey, has conducted systematic research at Nabta Playa since 1973. Their work represents one of the longest-running archaeological projects in Africa, with over 30 seasons of excavation and analysis. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in 2007 revealed extensive subsurface features surrounding the visible stone circle. Dr. Sahar Fairs from Cairo University led these investigations, discovering buried megalithic alignments extending radially outward from the central circle across distances exceeding 200 meters. These underground structures suggest the visible monument represents only a fraction of the original complex. Geological analysis has raised equally perplexing questions about the site's history. Core samples from the ancient lakebed show Nabta Playa held permanent water from approximately 9,000 to 3,000 BC, supported by monsoon rains that penetrated far deeper into the Sahara than today. But the megalithic monuments were built during the wettest period, when abundant water and pasture should have made astronomical calendars unnecessary for survival. Dr. Romuald Schild from the Polish Academy of Sciences has documented over 600 megalithic sites within a 50-kilometer radius of the main calendar circle. These include stone alignments, circular arrangements, and complex structures resembling much later temple complexes. Dating evidence shows continuous monument construction spanning 3,000 years, indicating persistent cultural traditions among shifting populations. The missing evidence is as significant as what survives. Despite intensive excavation, researchers have found no metal tools, no written records, no evidence for specialized crafts beyond basic pottery and stoneworking. The technological contrast is stark. People capable of creating sophisticated astronomical instruments apparently lacked bronze working, permanent architecture, or administrative systems that developed elsewhere during the same period. Recent isotope analysis of human remains from Nabta Playa burials has added another puzzle. Dr. Christina Knipper from the Kurt Engelhorn Center for Archaeology found evidence for long-distance mobility patterns, with individuals showing chemical signatures from regions hundreds of kilometers away. This suggests the calendar circles served not just local pastoralists, but far-flung networks spanning the ancient Sahara. The astronomical calendar theory proposes that Nabta Playa monuments served practical purposes for nomadic pastoralists tracking seasonal changes across vast territories. Supporters like Dr. Malville argue the alignments helped coordinate migrations, predict flooding patterns, and schedule social gatherings when scattered groups reunited during favorable seasons. This explanation accounts for the site's practical value, but struggles to explain why such precision was necessary for successful pastoralism. The religious center hypothesis suggests Nabta Playa functioned as a ceremonial pilgrimage destination, where diverse groups gathered for seasonal rituals honoring celestial deities. Proponents point to elaborate cattle burials found throughout the site, evidence for massive feasting events, and the monument's resemblance to later Egyptian temple complexes. Dr. Windorf himself favored this interpretation, arguing the calendar circle represented humanity's first attempt to create permanent sacred space dedicated to astronomical worship. The technological diffusion theory, advocated by some researchers including Dr. Thomas Brophy from the University of Colorado, proposes that Nabta Playa represents evidence for advanced knowledge systems spreading from unknown sources. This controversial hypothesis suggests the site's sophistication reflects contact with more advanced civilizations, possibly from the Nile Valley or Middle East. Critics argue this explanation unnecessarily multiplies unknowns and underestimates indigenous African innovation. Each theory faces critical flaws. The practical calendar explanation doesn't account for the enormous labor investment required, or the continued refinements spanning millennia. The religious center hypothesis lacks evidence for the specialized priesthood such elaborate astronomy would require. The diffusion theory contradicts archaeological evidence showing Nabta Playa predates comparable developments in neighboring regions. Stand at Nabta Playa during summer solstice, and 7,000 years collapse into a moment. The sun rises precisely between ancient stone gates, casting shadows that transform the circle into a sundial marking seasons unchanged since people first gathered cattle beside this ancient lake. The silence is profound, broken only by wind moving through acacia trees and the distant call of desert larks. The people who built this monument lived completely different lives from modern desert dwellers. They inhabited a green Sahara, where elephants browsed along lake shores, where rivers flowed year-round through landscapes now buried beneath sand. Their cattle were enormous, wild aurochs, recently domesticated from African species, requiring vast pastures and seasonal movements following rains across territories larger than modern countries. Their knowledge systems must have been remarkably sophisticated, despite leaving no written records. Tracking stellar positions with the precision demonstrated here requires systematic observations spanning generations, mathematical understanding of geometric principles, and social institutions stable enough to preserve and transmit complex information across centuries. These people were creating astronomy while Mesopotamians were just beginning to farm. The seasonal gatherings at Nabta Playa must have been extraordinary events. Imagine scattered pastoral groups converging from across the Sahara during favorable seasons, bringing cattle herds, trade goods, marriage partners, and knowledge accumulated during months of isolation. The calendar circle would have provided focus for ceremonies marking crucial transitions, the solstice announcing summer rains, stellar alignments predicting flooding patterns, cosmic cycles connecting human activities to eternal rhythms. Archaeological evidence suggests these gatherings involved massive feasting, with cattle sacrifices on scales that consumed entire herds. This wasn't subsistence eating, but conspicuous consumption designed to demonstrate wealth, strengthen social bonds, and honor deities governing rain, fertility, and seasonal cycles. The bones tell stories of celebration, ceremony, and perhaps competition among groups establishing status through astronomical knowledge and ritual performance. Nabta Playa remains largely inaccessible to casual visitors, protected by its remote location and Egyptian antiquities regulations. The site lies within a military zone requiring special permits, and reaching it demands four-wheel drive vehicles, GPS navigation, and extensive desert travel experience. Most tourists never learn of its existence, despite its profound significance for understanding human development. Recent threats to the site have increased dramatically as climate change intensifies Saharan conditions and rare flash floods cause accelerated erosion. The 2020 floods damaged several megalithic alignments, and rising sand levels threaten to bury monuments that survived 7,000 years of desert conditions. Egyptian authorities lack resources for comprehensive site protection, leaving these irreplaceable monuments vulnerable to both natural forces and occasional vandalism. Dr. Salima Ikram from the American University in Cairo has advocated for enhanced protection and systematic documentation before more evidence disappears. Her team's 3D modeling project, conducted between 2018 and 2021, created detailed digital records of surviving monuments, but funding limitations prevented comprehensive coverage of the broader megalithic complex. The connection between Nabta Playa and later Egyptian astronomical traditions remains hotly debated. Some researchers detect direct continuities between megalithic alignments and orientation patterns in dynastic temples, suggesting knowledge traditions preserved across millennia. Others argue the connections are coincidental, pointing to gaps of thousands of years between monument construction and historical records. For modern astronomical education, Nabta Playa offers powerful lessons about human curiosity and mathematical innovation. The site demonstrates that systematic scientific observation predates writing, cities, and complex political systems by millennia. These ancient pastoralists were conducting astronomy not from necessity, but from the same drive to understand cosmic patterns that motivates modern researchers. My assessment is that Nabta Playa represents something profound about human nature that Western archaeology has struggled to acknowledge. Here we see people who chose to invest enormous labor in understanding cosmic cycles despite living mobile lives focused on immediate survival needs. They created permanent monuments in temporary landscapes, establishing continuity across generations through astronomical knowledge rather than written records. The site forces us to reconsider linear narratives about technological progress. We're accustomed to thinking sophistication requires cities, writing systems, and complex political hierarchies. But Nabta Playa demonstrates that profound scientific knowledge can emerge from entirely different social foundations. These pastoralists achieved astronomical precision through collective memory, oral traditions, and persistent observations spanning centuries. Perhaps most importantly, the site illustrates Africa's central role in developing scientific thought. This isn't primitive astronomy, but sophisticated mathematical understanding emerging from indigenous African innovation thousands of years before comparable developments elsewhere. The fact that such achievements remain marginalized in popular understanding reveals more about contemporary biases than ancient capabilities. Now, I want to know what you think about this next detail, because it's the one thing that keeps archaeologists awake at night. The Nabta Playa circle's stellar alignments match orientation patterns found in temples at Karnak and Dendur, built 4,000 years later and 1,000 kilometers away. Does this remind you of anything you've seen or heard about? Let me know, because every perspective helps piece together this puzzle. The questions Nabta Playa raises extend far beyond ancient astronomy into fundamental issues about knowledge, continuity, and cultural memory that continue shaping human societies today. The workman's shovel struck something hard beneath the cemetery floor, producing a hollow sound that stopped excavation immediately. Dr. John Garstang, from the University of Liverpool, had been excavating predynastic burials at Hierakonpolis since 1905, expecting another simple pit grave containing pottery and personal ornaments. Instead, on that morning in January 1898, his team had uncovered a chamber that would rewrite understanding of early Egyptian civilization. Hierakonpolis lies 700 kilometers south of Cairo, on the Nile's west bank, where desert hills meet fertile floodplains that supported Egypt's earliest known urban settlement. The site's ancient name was Nekhen, Falcon City, honoring the deity who would later become patron of all Egyptian pharaohs. By 3500 BC, Hierakonpolis was already a major center with monumental architecture, specialized crafts, and social hierarchies that preceded unification of Upper and Lower Egypt by centuries. The tomb Garstang discovered defied every expectation about predynastic capabilities. Instead of a simple burial pit, his team found a multi-room complex carved into bedrock and lined with fired brick walls. The entrance chamber measured 4.5 by 3.2 meters, with doorways leading to smaller rooms arranged around a central burial area. This architectural sophistication predated the earliest known mastaba tombs by at least 400 years. But the real shock came when they illuminated the interior walls. Every surface was covered with elaborate paintings depicting scenes no one had ever associated with predynastic Egypt. There were boats with distinctive curved prows, sailing rivers, teeming with fish and crocodiles. There were hunters pursuing lions, leopards, and other animals through marshlands. Most remarkably, there were organized battle scenes showing warriors in formation, carrying weapons and standards that wouldn't appear in official Egyptian art for generations. The painting style was unlike anything in Egyptian artistic tradition. Instead of the formal hierarchical compositions characteristic of dynastic art, these images showed naturalistic movement, complex overlapping figures, and dynamic action sequences. The colors remained vivid despite nearly 5,000 years underground. Brilliant reds, deep blues, golden yellows, and rich blacks, creating scenes that seemed to pulse with life. Dr. Garstang recognized immediately that this discovery would force complete reconsideration of predynastic Egyptian capabilities and artistic development. What he couldn't have anticipated was how controversial his findings would become, or how subsequent discoveries would make the painted tomb's mysteries even more profound. Tomb 100 at Hierakonpolis contains the earliest known narrative paintings in Egyptian art, predating the famous tomb decorations at Saqqara and Giza by 800 years. But the sophisticated artistic techniques, complex iconography, and technological achievement represented in these paintings suggest cultural developments that contradict standard models of predynastic society. The paintings demonstrate mastery of perspective, proportional relationships, and color mixing that supposedly didn't develop until the Old Kingdom period. Figures show three-dimensional modeling through subtle shading, overlapping compositions that create depth, and anatomical accuracy indicating systematic study of human and animal forms. These techniques require extensive artistic training and cultural institutions capable of supporting specialized craftspeople across generations. The iconographic program reveals equally advanced conceptual thinking. The tomb's paintings tell coherent stories connecting earthly activities with divine powers, seasonal cycles, and cosmic order. One wall shows boat processions that clearly represent religious festivals, with standardized religious symbols and ceremonial objects that appear in later Egyptian temple art. Another wall depicts hunting scenes that function as metaphors for royal power, using symbolic conventions that persist throughout pharaonic history. Most puzzling is evidence for writing systems that predate hieroglyphic development by centuries. Several painted symbols show systematic relationships suggesting phonetic representation rather than simple pictographic communication. Dr. Ginter Dreuer from the German Archaeological Institute has identified at least 30 distinct signs that appear to function as logographic writing, making this potentially the world's oldest known script. The technical achievement of the paintings themselves presents archaeological puzzles that remain unsolved. Chemical analysis reveals pigments requiring sophisticated mineral processing, including ultramarine blue made from lapis lazuli imported from Afghanistan, and cinnabar red requiring mercury extraction from mineral ores. The binding agents show organic chemistry knowledge, using proteins and plant resins in combinations that ensure exceptional color preservation. The tomb's construction demonstrates engineering capabilities equally advanced as the artistic program. The multi-room design required careful planning, precise measurement, and structural engineering to prevent collapse in loose sediment soils. Ventilation systems maintained air circulation through complex passages, and drainage features prevented water damage during Nile floods. This architectural sophistication suggests specialized building traditions that left no other archaeological traces. The Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago has conducted systematic research at Hierakonpolis since 1967, led by Dr. Michael Hoffman and later Dr. Renee Friedman. Their work has revealed Tomb 100 as part of a much larger predynastic complex, including monumental architecture, craft production areas, and social facilities that rival any contemporary urban center worldwide. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in 1995 discovered extensive buried structures surrounding the painted tomb. Dr. Andreas Schmidt from Ludwig Maximilian University conducted these investigations, revealing foundation remains of massive walls, regular building patterns, and sophisticated drainage systems extending across 25 hectares. These underground features suggest Hierakonpolis was a planned city with administrative quarters, residential neighborhoods, and ceremonial precincts arranged according to systematic urban design principles. Excavations in adjacent areas have uncovered workshop facilities where craftspeople produced goods requiring specialized technical knowledge. Dr. Friedman's team found evidence for large-scale beer brewing, fine pottery production, and metalworking facilities that processed copper, gold, and precious stones. The workshop areas show clear social stratification, with elite residences overlooking craft production zones and evidence for administrative control over specialized industries. Recent petrographic analysis of pottery from Tomb 100 has revealed long-distance trade networks spanning the ancient Near East and sub-Saharan Africa. Dr. Ulrich Hartung from the German Archaeological Institute identified ceramic styles originating in Mesopotamia, Nubia, and the Eastern Desert, indicating commercial relationships that extended across thousands of kilometers. This evidence contradicts models portraying predynastic Egypt as isolated agricultural communities with limited external contacts. The missing evidence at Hierakonpolis is as significant as surviving remains. Despite clear evidence for administrative complexity, researchers have found no written archives, no standardized weights and measures, and no evidence for the bureaucratic systems that supported later Egyptian civilization. The painted tomb shows sophisticated artistic and architectural traditions that apparently vanished without trace, leaving no stylistic descendants in subsequent Egyptian art. Isotopy analysis of human remains from elite burials has revealed population diversity that challenges traditional assumptions about early Egyptian ethnicity. Dr. Janet Mong from the University of Pennsylvania found evidence for individuals originating in Nubia, the Eastern Mediterranean, and possibly sub-Saharan Africa, suggesting Hierakonpolis functioned as a cosmopolitan center, attracting settlers from diverse cultural backgrounds. The indigenous development theory proposes that Hierakonpolis represents natural cultural evolution among Nile Valley populations developing increasingly complex social organization. Supporters like Dr. Friedman argue the site demonstrates African innovation producing urban civilization independently of Middle Eastern influences. The painted tomb, according to this interpretation, reflects local artistic traditions that were later suppressed or transformed by political changes accompanying dynastic unification. The cultural diffusion hypothesis suggests Hierakonpolis developed through contact with more advanced Mesopotamian civilizations, borrowing artistic techniques, architectural principles, and social organization from established urban centers like Uruk and Ur. Proponents point to Mesopotamian artistic influences in Tomb 100's paintings, especially boat designs and animal motifs that closely resemble contemporary Sumerian art. This theory explains the site's sophistication, but struggles with chronological problems and evidence for distinctly African cultural elements. The lost civilization theory, advocated by some researchers including Dr. Robert Bauval, proposes that Hierakonpolis represents surviving evidence for advanced prehistoric societies whose achievements were largely erased by climate change, political upheaval, or deliberate destruction. This controversial hypothesis suggests the painted tomb preserves artistic traditions from much older civilizations, explaining its sophistication through cultural inheritance rather than independent development. Each theory faces significant evidential challenges. Indigenous development cannot easily explain the sudden appearance of sophisticated techniques without clear precursors in earlier Egyptian sites. Cultural diffusion struggles with evidence for distinctly African innovations and the absence of typical Mesopotamian cultural markers. The lost civilization hypothesis lacks supporting evidence from other sites and requires speculative scenarios that multiply rather than resolve archaeological uncertainties. Enter Tomb 100 today, and you step into humanity's earliest attempt to create eternal narrative through visual art. The painted walls surround visitors with stories that connected ancient lives to cosmic cycles, seasonal rhythms, and divine powers governing existence along the Nile. Despite 5,000 years of separation, the emotional power of these images remains immediate and compelling. The people who created this tomb lived during Egypt's cultural adolescence, when scattered communities were coalescing into the civilization that would build pyramids and rule an empire spanning continents. They inhabited a landscape more fertile than modern Egypt, where regular floods supported vast marshlands teeming with wildlife. Their lives centered on the rhythms of flood and drought, harvest and hunger, that shaped every aspect of existence along the Great River. The tomb's owner was clearly someone of extraordinary importance, commanding resources necessary for months of skilled artistic work and architectural construction. But the paintings suggest this individual's power derived from spiritual rather than purely political authority. The recurring boat imagery represents journeys between earthly and divine realms, while hunting scenes show mastery over natural forces that threaten human survival. The artists who decorated these walls possessed knowledge and techniques that required decades of training and cultural institutions sophisticated enough to preserve specialized knowledge across generations. They understood anatomy well enough to create naturalistic figures, chemistry sufficiently to produce lasting pigments, and narrative principles complex enough to tell coherent stories through visual sequence. These weren't primitive decorations, but sophisticated communications designed to function for eternity. The community that supported this artistic achievement must have been remarkably organized, despite leaving no written administrative records. Creating Tomb 100 required coordinating miners extracting pigments, merchants importing exotic materials, craftspeople manufacturing tools and brushes, and laborers constructing the underground complex. This level of social cooperation suggests institutions, leadership systems, and cultural values that prioritize collective artistic achievement over individual wealth accumulation. Tomb 100 remains accessible to researchers, but is closed to general tourism due to conservation concerns and site security issues. The Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities has implemented strict access protocols following damage from unauthorized visits in the 1990s, when photography flashes and humidity from visitors' breath began degrading the ancient paintings. Current conservation efforts focus on environmental controls and digital documentation. Dr. Melinda Hartwig from the Metropolitan Museum of Art leads an international team creating comprehensive photographic records and 3D models of the painted surfaces. This work has revealed details invisible to earlier researchers, including evidence for multiple painting phases and extensive restoration work conducted in ancient times. The connection between Hierakonpolis and later Egyptian artistic traditions continues generating scholarly debate. Dr. Gay Robbins from Emory University has identified clear stylistic continuities between Tomb 100's paintings and dynastic temple decorations, suggesting preservation of artistic knowledge across centuries of political upheaval. Others argue the similarities are coincidental, pointing to fundamental differences in composition, technique, and iconographic meaning. For contemporary archaeological methodology, Hierakonpolis has provided crucial lessons about preserving fragile remains in challenging environments. The site's location in Egypt's arid south creates unique conservation challenges, with extreme temperature fluctuations, occasional flooding, and wind erosion threatening both exposed and buried remains. Techniques developed here now influence preservation strategies at archaeological sites worldwide. The tomb's significance for understanding African contributions to world civilization continues growing as new analytical techniques reveal previously unknown aspects of predynastic culture. Recent work has documented sophisticated mathematical knowledge, astronomical observations, and technological innovations that demonstrate Africa's central role in developing human civilization millennia before European recognition. My assessment is that Tomb 100 represents humanity's first successful attempt to create truly eternal art, paintings designed to function beyond individual lifetimes in service of cosmic rather than merely personal purposes. The tomb's creators understood that visual narrative could preserve crucial cultural knowledge across generations, making artistic achievement a form of collective memory that transcends written records. Here's where it gets strange, and I mean really strange. The painting techniques used in this 5,000-year-old tomb are more sophisticated than those in many royal tombs built 1,000 years later during Egypt's supposed artistic golden age. Some viewers have pointed out similarities to European cave paintings, but I'm not convinced. What patterns do you see here? Your observations might catch something researchers missed. The site forces us to reconsider assumptions about linear cultural development and the relationship between technological sophistication and social complexity. We see advanced artistic achievement emerging from communities that lacked writing, monumental architecture, and bureaucratic administration. This suggests alternative pathways for cultural development that don't conform to standard models based on Mesopotamian or European examples. Perhaps most importantly, Hierakonpolis demonstrates that African civilizations were creating sophisticated urban centers, developing complex artistic traditions, and establishing long-distance trade networks contemporaneously with or earlier than comparable developments anywhere in the world. The marginalization of these achievements in popular understanding reflects contemporary biases rather than ancient realities. The questions raised by Tomb 100 extend beyond Egyptology into fundamental issues about cultural memory, artistic purpose, and the role of creativity in establishing social identity. These ancient painters were addressing the same essential human needs that drive contemporary artistic production: the desire to create meaning, preserve experience, and connect individual lives to larger cosmic purposes. The ancient temple rose from Lake Nasser's waters like a medieval cathedral, its massive stone blocks defying both time and the flooding that had claimed every other structure for hundreds of kilometers. Dr. Pamela Rose from the Egypt Exploration Society first saw Qasr Ibrahim in 1961 during emergency surveys preceding the Aswan High Dam's completion. What she found there challenged everything archaeologists thought they knew about Nubian civilization and Egypt's southern frontier. Qasr Ibrahim sits on a sandstone promontory that originally overlooked the Nile from heights exceeding 70 meters above the ancient riverbed. Today it rises as an island from Lake Nasser's artificial waters, the only major archaeological site between Aswan and Sudan that survived the flooding. The location commanded strategic views across the Nile for dozens of kilometers, controlling river traffic and trade routes that connected Egypt with sub-Saharan Africa. Initial excavations revealed architectural sophistication that contradicted standard assumptions about Nubian technological capabilities and political organization. Instead of simple mud brick structures typical of frontier settlements, Rose's team discovered massive stone temples, elaborate residential complexes, and defensive installations comparable to anything in contemporary Egypt. Carbon dating suggested continuous occupation spanning over 3,000 years, from early New Kingdom times through the Islamic period. But the real surprises emerged as excavations penetrated deeper archaeological levels. Beneath Ptolemaic and Roman remains, researchers found evidence for much older temple complexes that predated any known Egyptian presence in Nubia. These early structures showed architectural styles and construction techniques that didn't match Egyptian building traditions, but demonstrated comparable sophistication and far greater adaptation to local environmental conditions. The site's preservation was extraordinary. Qasr Ibrahim's arid microclimate and protected location had maintained organic materials that normally decompose within decades. Wooden architectural elements, leather manuscripts, textile fragments, and even food remains providing unprecedented insights into daily life across millennia. Dr. Giovanni Ruffini from Fairfield University described it as Pompeii in the desert, offering freeze-frame glimpses of ancient Nubian civilization. Most remarkably, the archaeological sequence revealed cultural continuities spanning the Pharaonic, Ptolemaic, Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic periods. Rather than showing conquest and replacement, the evidence suggested persistent local populations that adapted, absorbed, and transformed successive waves of outside influence while maintaining distinct cultural identity. This pattern challenged colonial narratives about Nubian history and Egypt's relationship with African societies. Qasr Ibrahim contains the most complete archaeological record of Nubian civilization available anywhere in the world, with occupation levels spanning 3,300 years of continuous settlement. But the evidence reveals technological achievements, cultural sophistication, and political organization that contradict standard assumptions about Egypt's southern neighbors and the development of African civilizations. The earliest temple phases show architectural innovations that predate comparable developments in Egypt by several centuries. These include sophisticated ventilation systems designed for extreme desert conditions, structural engineering adapted to sandstone geology, and hydraulic features that managed seasonal flooding through complex drainage networks. The builders demonstrated mathematical knowledge sufficient for calculating load distributions, geometric relationships, and astronomical alignments with precision exceeding contemporary Egyptian examples. Written materials preserved at Qasr Ibrahim include over 5,000 documents in Old Nubian, Coptic, Arabic, and Greek that provide unprecedented insights into African literacy and intellectual traditions. The Old Nubian materials represent the world's largest collection of texts in this language, revealing sophisticated literary traditions, administrative systems, and religious philosophies that developed independently of Egyptian influence while maintaining extensive cultural exchange with Mediterranean civilizations. The technological evidence contradicts assumptions about Nubian technological dependence on Egypt. Archaeological remains include advanced metallurgy facilities capable of producing high-quality steel, sophisticated ceramic industries that created luxury goods exported throughout the eastern Mediterranean, and evidence for mathematical and astronomical knowledge that enabled precise calendar, systems, and architectural alignments. These achievements demonstrate indigenous innovation rather than technological borrowing from northern neighbors. Perhaps most significantly, the site's religious architecture reveals theological concepts and ceremonial practices that influenced later Egyptian temple design. Several architectural features first documented at Qasr Ibrim appear centuries later in major Egyptian temple complexes, suggesting northward cultural flow that contradicts standard diffusion models. The religious texts describe creation myths and cosmic philosophies that clearly influenced later Coptic and Islamic theological development in the Nile Valley. Economic evidence reveals trade networks that extended far beyond anything previously documented for ancient Nubia. Excavated materials include Chinese porcelain, Indian textiles, Arabian incense, and African ivory that demonstrate commercial relationships spanning the Indian Ocean and trans-Saharan trade systems. The quantities and quality suggest Qasr Ibrim functioned as a major commercial center rather than a peripheral frontier settlement. The preservation of organic materials has revealed dietary and agricultural practices that successfully supported substantial urban populations in challenging desert environments. Analysis shows sustainable food production systems that maintain soil fertility across centuries, water management techniques that maximize limited rainfall, and crop selection strategies that produce dietary diversity sufficient for complex urban society. These achievements demonstrate environmental knowledge that modern agricultural science is only beginning to understand. The Egypt Exploration Society has maintained continuous research at Qasr Ibrim since 1961, making it one of the longest-running archaeological projects in Africa. Their work has generated over 60 years of detailed documentation covering every aspect of ancient Nubian civilization and providing crucial comparative data for understanding Nile Valley cultural development. Systematic architectural analysis has revealed construction phases and building techniques that demonstrate remarkable engineering sophistication. Dr. Claudia Inser from Humboldt University has documented foundation systems that compensate for sandstone structural weaknesses, roof designs that maintain cool interior temperatures during extreme heat, and defensive features that integrate natural topography with artificial fortifications to create nearly impregnable military installations. Environmental analysis using paleobotanical and zooarchaeological methods has reconstructed ancient ecological conditions and subsistence strategies that supported Qasr Ibrim's population across varying climatic periods. Dr. Renate Germer from the University of Hamburg found evidence for sophisticated agricultural systems that maintain productivity during drought cycles, managed seasonal flooding for maximum benefit, and created artificial oases that supported diverse plant and animal communities. Linguistic analysis of the preserved documents has revealed Nubian intellectual traditions that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. Dr. Gerald Brown from the University of Illinois has translated administrative records showing complex legal systems, educational institutions, and governmental organization that managed multi-ethnic populations and extensive territorial holdings with remarkable efficiency. The missing evidence includes monuments and archives that should exist if standard models of Nubian-Egyptian relationships were accurate. Despite clear evidence for sophisticated political organization and extensive external contacts, researchers have found no Egyptian administrative records, no evidence for direct political control from Memphis or Thebes, and no indication that Qasr Ibrim functioned as a colonial outpost rather than an independent center. Recent work using ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery has revealed the full extent of Qasr Ibrim's urban complex, much of which remains buried beneath accumulated sand deposits. Dr. Andreas Schmidt's surveys have documented foundation remains extending across areas 5 times larger than visible surface ruins, suggesting the site supported populations exceeding 10,000 people during its peak periods. The Egyptian frontier hypothesis proposes that Qasr Ibrahim functioned primarily as a military and administrative outpost designed to control Nubian populations and protect Egypt's southern borders. Supporters argue the site's fortifications, Egyptian architectural influences, and strategic location demonstrate colonial functions rather than indigenous urban development. This theory explains the site's defensive character, but struggles with evidence for independent cultural development and sophisticated local traditions. The African kingdom theory suggests Qasr Ibrahim served as a major center for independent Nubian kingdoms that maintained political autonomy while engaging in extensive cultural and commercial exchange with Egypt and other Mediterranean civilizations. Proponents like Dr. Derek Welsby from the British Museum point to evidence for indigenous political institutions, local religious traditions, and technological innovations that demonstrate cultural independence rather than colonial dependence. The cultural bridge hypothesis, advocated by researchers including Dr. Rose, proposes that Qasr Ibrahim functioned as a cosmopolitan center where Egyptian, Nubian, and sub-Saharan African cultures merged to create unique synthetic traditions. According to this interpretation, the site's significance lies not in political control or ethnic identity, but in its role as a cultural laboratory where diverse influences combined to produce innovations that influence development throughout the Nile Valley. Each theory addresses some archaeological evidence while struggling with other aspects. The frontier hypothesis cannot explain the sophisticated indigenous traditions and architectural innovations that clearly predate Egyptian influence. The kingdom theory struggles with evidence for extensive Egyptian cultural influence and apparent political subordination during certain periods. The cultural bridge model may underestimate the importance of political and military factors in shaping the site's development. Walk through Qasr Ibrahim's ruins today, and you experience the convergence of Africa and the Mediterranean world in ways that connect ancient realities with contemporary global relationships. The temple walls still bear inscriptions in 5 different languages, testament to cultural diversity that made this remote island a cosmopolitan center, rivaling Alexandria or Memphis. The people who built this extraordinary center lived at the intersection of multiple worlds: African kingdoms to the south, Egyptian pharaohs to the north, Arabian traders from the east, and Mediterranean merchants from distant cities. They spoke multiple languages, practiced syncretic religions that blended diverse traditions, and created architectural styles that combined influences from across the known world while maintaining distinctly Nubian character. Their daily lives centered on managing the challenges of desert living while maintaining connections to far-flung commercial and cultural networks. They developed sophisticated water management systems that captured rare rainfall, created artificial gardens that supported diverse agriculture, and established trading relationships that brought luxury goods from China, India, and Rome to this remote desert promontory. The religious community at Qasr Ibrahim practiced forms of worship that influenced theological development throughout the region. Their synthesis of ancient African traditions, Egyptian religious concepts, and later Christian and Islamic teachings created theological innovations that spread throughout the Nile Valley. The preserved religious texts reveal philosophical sophistication that demonstrates Africa's central role in developing world religious traditions. The intellectual life of this ancient center encompassed mathematical, astronomical, and medical knowledge that kept pace with developments in the great cities of antiquity. The preserved documents reveal educational institutions that produced scholars, administrators, and religious leaders who influenced political and cultural development throughout Nubia and Egypt. These achievements demonstrate African contributions to world intellectual history that remain under-recognized in contemporary scholarship. Qasr Ibrahim's unique status as the only major Nubian site to survive the creation of Lake Nasser has made it both precious and vulnerable. The site sits entirely surrounded by water, accessible only by boat and subject to erosion, humidity, and tourism pressures that threaten its long-term preservation. Rising lake levels due to climate change and upstream dam construction create additional conservation challenges. UNESCO designated Qasr Ibrahim as part of the Nubian Monuments World Heritage Site in 1979, recognizing its outstanding universal value for understanding African civilization and cultural development along the Nile. However, the site's isolation and Egypt's limited conservation resources have constrained protection efforts and public access programs that could raise awareness of its significance. Current research focuses on digital documentation and advanced analytical techniques that maximize scientific value from limited excavation opportunities. Dr. Claudia Rossi from the CNRs has created comprehensive 3D models of the architectural remains, while international teams conduct specialized studies of the preserved organic materials using advanced chemical and biological analysis methods. The site's significance for understanding Nubian contributions to world civilization continues growing as new analytical techniques reveal previously unknown aspects of ancient African culture. Recent studies have documented sophisticated medical knowledge, advanced astronomical observations, and innovative agricultural techniques that demonstrate Africa's central role in developing human civilization. For contemporary discussions about cultural identity, migration, and globalization, Qasr Ibrahim provides powerful evidence that cultural diversity and international exchange have shaped human societies for millennia. The site demonstrates that successful civilizations have always been cosmopolitan, multicultural centers that gain strength through diversity rather than ethnic purity. My assessment is that Qasr Ibrahim represents one of humanity's most successful experiments in creating sustainable civilization in extreme environments while maintaining openness to cultural exchange and diversity. The site demonstrates that environmental challenges can stimulate rather than constrain cultural achievement when communities possess adaptive knowledge and maintain connections to broader networks of human experience. The evidence forces us to reconsider standard narratives about African civilization and Egypt's relationship with sub-Saharan cultures. Rather than showing Egyptian dominance over primitive neighbors, Qasr Ibrahim reveals sophisticated African societies that maintain cultural independence while actively participating in Mediterranean commercial and intellectual networks. The northward flow of innovations challenges assumptions about technological and cultural diffusion. Perhaps most importantly, the site illustrates alternative models for organizing complex multicultural societies that achieved remarkable stability across many centuries. The people of Qasr Ibrahim created institutions that successfully managed ethnic diversity, religious plurality, and economic complexity without the authoritarian control systems that characterize many ancient empires. After everything we've explored, which of these mysteries disturbed you the most? And more importantly, why do you think these stories were hidden for so long? The questions raised by Qasr Ibrahim extend beyond archaeological interest into contemporary challenges facing societies adapting to environmental change while maintaining cultural identity and international cooperation. These ancient Nubians succeeded for over 3 millennia at challenges that contemporary civilizations are just beginning to understand. These 4 locations represent only the beginning of Egypt's hidden archaeological heritage, sites that challenge our understanding of African civilization and human development in ways that extend far beyond academic interest. Each mystery reveals sophisticated societies that achieved remarkable technological and cultural innovations while remaining marginalized in popular understanding of ancient history. The patterns emerge clearly across these diverse sites. We see astronomical knowledge predating comparable developments elsewhere by millennia. We encounter artistic achievements that exceed later productions during supposed golden ages. We discover technological capabilities that contradict assumptions about linear progress and cultural diffusion. Most importantly, we find evidence for African innovation and intellectual achievement that shaped world civilization in ways still not fully recognized. What makes these oversights particularly significant is their systematic nature. This isn't accidental neglect, but rather the result of institutional biases that have shaped archaeological interpretation and public education for over a century. The focus on dynastic Egypt, while understandable and important, has created blind spots that minimize Africa's broader contributions to human development and cultural innovation. The implications extend beyond academic debates into contemporary issues of cultural identity, historical narrative, and global understanding. These Egyptian mysteries demonstrate that sophisticated civilizations developed along multiple pathways that don't conform to models based on European or Middle Eastern examples. They show technological and artistic achievement emerging from social organization that prioritize different values and employ different strategies than those emphasized in standard historical accounts. Perhaps most importantly, these sites reveal the interconnected nature of ancient African societies and their extensive influence on Mediterranean and Middle Eastern civilizations. The evidence consistently shows northward and eastward cultural flow that challenges assumptions about civilizational development and the sources of innovation that shaped early human history. The urgency of documenting and protecting these sites cannot be overstated. Climate change, development pressures, and limited conservation resources threaten irreplaceable evidence that could revolutionize understanding of human civilization. Each site lost represents not just archaeological destruction, but the permanent loss of alternative perspectives on human achievement and cultural development. These mysteries also demonstrate the importance of indigenous knowledge systems and local research traditions that often understand their heritage more completely than external investigators. Egyptian archaeologists, Nubian communities, and local scholars have maintained awareness of these sites' significance even when international attention focused elsewhere. The philosophical implications reach beyond archaeology into fundamental questions about human potential, cultural achievement, and the pathways societies follow when adapting to environmental challenges. These ancient peoples created solutions to problems that contemporary civilizations are just beginning to confront: sustainable desert agriculture, multicultural political organization, and technological development adapted to local conditions rather than imposed from external models. Looking forward, these Egyptian mysteries suggest enormous potential for future discoveries that could further transform understanding of ancient Africa and its contributions to world civilization. Advances in remote sensing, analytical techniques, and international cooperation are revealing previously unknown sites and providing new insights into familiar locations. The greatest mystery may be why such remarkable achievements remained hidden for so long, despite being documented by professional archaeologists and published in academic journals. The answer reveals more about contemporary assumptions and institutional biases than ancient capabilities. These sites were never truly lost. They were simply ignored by narratives that couldn't accommodate evidence for African innovation and achievement. As we face contemporary challenges of climate adaptation, cultural diversity, and sustainable development, these ancient Egyptian mysteries offer more than historical interest. They provide examples of human societies that successfully address similar challenges through innovation, cooperation, and respect for environmental limits, while creating cultural achievements that continue inspiring wonder and admiration after millennia. The hidden Egypt revealed through these four mysteries demonstrates that our ancestors were far more sophisticated, innovative, and culturally diverse than standard historical narratives suggest. Their achievements deserve recognition not as curiosities or anomalies, but as central examples of human potential and African contributions to world civilization. These mysteries remind us that the past remains largely unexplored despite centuries of archaeological investigation. Each new discovery has the potential to revolutionize understanding and reveal previously unknown aspects of human achievement. The four sites we've examined today represent just the beginning of Egypt's archaeological heritage, inviting continued exploration and challenging us to remain open to evidence that contradicts our assumptions about ancient capabilities and cultural development. The ultimate message of these hidden Egyptian mysteries is one of human potential and the importance of cultural diversity in driving innovation and achievement. These ancient societies created solutions we're still trying to understand, achieved precision we struggle to replicate, and maintained sustainable civilization longer than any contemporary nation. Their legacy challenges us to expand our understanding of what human societies can achieve when they combine knowledge, creativity, and respect for both cultural heritage and environmental limits.